Well, hello, hello.
Good morning, Nicholas. Happy Friday. Welcome to B2B Power Hour.
Welcome to B2B Power Hour. Get our energy up here and go and see what conversation you have for today. What's the
Oh,
topic of the hour?
topic of the hour today is something I know we're both ready to rant on and discuss and dive into
Oh
why
no.
tech stacks don't sell themselves. Get
Oh
your
god.
coffee ready. Let's strap in. I got water at least. Um, where, yep, exactly. Where I think we should dive in first is, and where maybe you want to start, Nick, is what's your first impression when you hear this topic? Why tech stacks don't sell themselves? Tech stacks are everywhere, right?
I love tech.
Yeah.
And I can give you a simple example. If anybody's watched the videos lately, they're a little bit blurry. At least on my side. Morgan always looks good, bugger.
Yeah.
But I was using a piece of software that auto framed, so I was always in the right spot in the picture. But it killed my quality. Why did I do that? So I didn't have to think about it. Why do we go and rely on software to do a lot of what we do? So we don't have to think about it because we have so many other things that are on our mind. So we hand it off to someone else. And why not a computer? It doesn't work all the time.
Clearly.
And what I'm seeing is a lot of companies when it comes to sales, there's no rhyme and rhythm to what they're doing. And so I talk to a lot of companies about their account list. Who are you targeting and why? They have no idea. Well, we have the software that does that for us. Fantastic. How do you score them to make sure that it's the right people anyways? Who are you targeting on that list? What's the chain of command? What's your your use case? How are you building a case to go and talk to them? I'm not really sure, Nick. I don't really know how to answer that because they rely too much on the software. And don't get me wrong, I love tech. Descript has changed the way that I edit video and audio forever, and I will never use anything else. Uh, Buying a professional mic and the amount of control you can have, buying a better camera, CRMs and the different information and analytics you can pull, Sales Navigator and how much time it can save you. I'm not saying that tech doesn't work. All I'm saying is you should not use it to bypass doing the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that a lot of the same thing in marketing where so much of the tech stack is optimized for a specific purpose. So, and we don't even think about these assumptions that are built into the technology. We sort of just receive them as received wisdom. Oh, this is what the technology does, so we should do that, right? So HubSpot is optimized for leads, of course, and that's because their database is entirely oriented around names and emails. Uh, there's like Active Campaign now has a lot more to it than it used to, but when it first came onto the scene, its bread and butter was email automation. And so you buy that piece of technology and you think, oh, we need to do email automation because, I don't know, everybody else in our industry is doing email automation. And that may be true. It may not be true. But I think the mistake that I see companies make a lot in the industry is they buy 4 or 5 different pieces of technology and then they just say, oh, well, we're just going to follow whatever the technology does. And that's not necessarily the same as good fundamentals in sales and marketing. I remember I was reading up, maybe it was like even AMA, like the American Marketing Association. They had done a survey of their members, and they said that marketers are like a huge proportion of marketers, 80% plus, have more than 4 different tools they're using in their tech stack, and more than half of them don't know how to use all of them.
That doesn't surprise me, actually.
I know, and I'm sure the numbers are probably pretty similar when it comes to sales too, right? Like
Oh,
there's
CRMs have become so robust that half the features I don't use. Well,
right,
more than half the features I don't use.
and I think that is a problem when we sort of sacrifice our energy, and as you said, oh, we'll just let the tech handle it. Like now, there's automated lead scoring, and can it work? Sure,
Should it?
and I'm not confident that it is the right solution for every business all the time.
Oh, it's like HubSpot in inbound marketing, what we got into last week. inbound used to be it was like the gravy hour. Like I remember when I was getting like 2, 3, 400 leads a week when we had a good marketing department that did relevant content. And then the clusters that HubSpot taught people to do and how it like kept people in the funnel, and it worked 6 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, that's also a problem.
But that's the biggest thing I'm seeing with tech is that people are not evolving best practices.
Mm.
And because it once worked, and it's human, we want to go and keep doing what worked. We don't want to evolve. We don't want to change because it's uncomfortable. And it's like email automation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time and a place now, but it's not what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing so many companies operating what they did 5 or 10 years ago, and they haven't changed. And how many companies that we see that don't embrace social, and they're missing such a huge opportunity, or they look at social like SEO, that it's intent based, and they're like, hey, I need to go, or they'll reuse their content that they have on a blog, and it's not conversational. It doesn't start a conversation. It's not how people are trying to consume information. And honestly, I'm think of that with TikTok. What's going to happen when people take the TikTok approach? The 30-second or less. It's not intent based. People just want to be entertained, and they don't mind being educated in the process, but it's got to be short and sweet.
Definitely. Well, and I also think there's a programmer I like. He's the CTO at Basecamp, and he talks about the lack of majestic monoliths. That's his term. It's such a funny visual. This, big single-use platform that's out there, and instead we're inundated with 30 different startups per category that all have venture funding behind it. And so some of what the noise is in the marketplace as a result of, there's all of this money being funneled into software to solve a very niche problem, and rarely are they all majestic monoliths. So then we have to spend time integrating, and then on top of integrating, and not even just like Zapier or no code tools to like get the platforms to talk to each other, but also like business intelligence dashboards. Then we have to layer analytics on top of it so that we understand each piece of the puzzle together. And I'm not of the opinion that a majestic monolith for MarTech is like the best idea ever. I think there is a use case for each small tool, but one of the reasons that that tech stacks don't sell themselves is it takes effort and intention to integrate all of your tools together. And if your sales team is working inside the CRM and your marketing team is working inside their analytics platform, and marketing never checks the CRM to see how well their campaigns are doing in actually driving sales, which based on the data we have now seems to happen far too often, you're not actually driving revenue. But instead, if you think of your organization as a single revenue entity, and you have sales, marketing, and success, and this is the RevOps methodology, this is what we talk about a lot, Nick, is now you have to create and construct technology in a way that makes sense across each part of the revenue cycle. And those things have to talk to each other, and those metrics from an operational perspective. And now there's all the, marketing ops, sales ops, rev ops, success ops, etc. To make sure that all of those metrics are aligned. That is like foundational. That's not even the motions that you have to go through with the tech stacks. That's just like step one, is get everyone on the same page and have all of your data integrated together.
Yeah, absolutely. Not having those blind spots is so hard among your tech stacks. And even having the right features kind of reminds me of buying a car. You get a whole bunch of other shit you never asked for, and then you're kind of stuck. But I want to go take it back one step. Why everybody buys tech is because they want it to do the work. But one of the things I'm seeing is because they're taking that knowledge, and it actually aligns really well with my post this morning. From us doing this, it caught me off guard how little I knew about customers and how many assumptions I was making. So I started doing interviews, thanks to Chris Walker, and I started doing 1 or 2 a week. And the things I was getting told that were problems, to me, seemed like common sense. But it's only because we talk about it every day, all day. But to them, because they have they're wearing so many different hats, it's not the usual. So I'll give you an example. So we were talking about building account lists for demand gen. What are your target accounts and why? Okay. So now you're shortlisting. And this has been the biggest question I've been asked. And I'd love to go and talk about it really briefly, even though it's not part of our agenda, is how do you shortlist an account list?
That's a great question.
But the reason why I bring it up with tech is because they're like, well, we use intent data. So what are the triggers?
And intent data isn't always that good. I mean, I remember somewhere in Demand Gen Live content, we both love Chris Walker here, so I liked the way he broke it out, which is there's low or assumed intent, or no or low intent, and then there's assumed intent, and then there's actual intent, and all of the intent data out in the world usually sits in that no or low to assumed intent. And those are the databases you can get. That's they visited our website, they put in their email for something, et cetera, until they actually reach out to you saying, I'm ready to buy. That's the third tier. That's the high intent. Everything else is just assumed, right? And to make strategic decisions on those assumptions maybe doesn't always lead to great revenue results.
So I couldn't agree more. But the question I get asked is, so how do you build that list?
So how do you build that list, Nick?
Because you can go on Navigator and you can go and get your list to about 1,000. There's your category, whether it's by size of company, your firmographic, demographics. You can go and do that. But if I said, Kay Morgan, you want to focus on 100 accounts, because that's where we started in sales. We got a list of 100, and we were not allowed to burn a list. We had to go in. Maybe we had about a 10% turnover per year, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Kind of depends on which marketer gave us the list and
how good it was. Yeah.
I'm not good. I wasn't gonna go there, but since you did,
I mean, let's be honest here. Yeah.
And I would love to hear Chris's opinion on it, but I think that somewhere about 50% of a salesperson's success comes from their list. Now we take that to marketing and we look at but the people keep thinking it's the companies. And I actually now am realizing it's the intelligence. What do you actually know about your customers? And the different chains of command and what they're responsible for and what that means. But now, how do you build a list of people that you're targeting that goes beyond who's been active in the last 30 days and who's recently got a promotion? Do you look at growth? Do you look at who's been commenting on your posts? Do you go and use the old LinkedIn hack where you go and join relevant events and you pull that list, and those are the the leads that are actually actively pursuing education in that particular category? How do you build a list? And without tech, most companies have no idea. And I'm going to tell you, it's hard. It is hard because what do you do? Without talking to someone, how do you build that list? What are your make it or break it to get to that short list? And I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first time that a lot of listeners are hearing this, because this was very foreign to me. This was never shared with me throughout my years of sales. It wasn't until I got into leadership and I started doing more sales strategy and kind of took it on myself that I realized that building lists is really hard.
Yeah.
And how many people build a list in 15 minutes and call it done? But this goes back to the sales stacks, to the marketing stacks. And this is just done automatically. We don't question why. We don't question how. And then we're wondering why these stacks don't perform, because the basics weren't thought about. Marketing and tech and all this, well, just in particular tech, should be to augment what you're doing well, because it'll also augment what you're not doing well. It shouldn't be your go-to.
Definitely.
And this is the biggest issue I'm seeing is people it's the default option. Just buy tech. I've been guilty of this. I bought marketing tech that I thought was going to make my life easy and realized that it was better for me to spend an extra, like twice as much time, because the quality was there instead of just the quantity.
Right. And I think it's so funny from a marketing perspective, at least, that we start our work with ideal client personas, usually, and then create messaging around those ideal client personas. And as we've talked about at length before, that doesn't work. It can work, but it's sort of like by happenstance, not through strategic intention. Do you actually get to the point where your marketing is resonant in the marketplace? Like, you actually have to research and interview customers to get to the point of knowing what you're putting out in the world works. And I think the intuition in building a list and shortlisting that list is, well, does it match our ideal client persona? I can hear it already. I can hear it in clients I've worked with or in teams I've worked with. Of like, well, who among these matches our ideal client persona? And it's like, that's not necessarily the best way to narrow down a list. Like, first of all, you may have clients, you may have made assumptions in your ICP that aren't true in the marketplace. And so you're going to exclude accounts that are actually really good fits, but because they don't meet your assumptions about what your ideal client is, they're not going to get shortlisted and they're not going to get targeted in an ABM strategy. And that's such a disservice. And more importantly, to the topic today, oftentimes we use technology to help solve that problem as well. And we, either lead scoring, or we do intent data from third-party databases, or all sorts of I can think of all the technology that exists out in the world to help you try and shortlist something. And that also may not be true. I mean, I'm certainly old school in the sense of like, if you can't put it in a spreadsheet, is it really that valuable? Like, especially in terms of like categorizing and shortlisting and defining, creating out, when were they last active? Do they meet this criteria? All a CRM is a very fancy and interactive way to organize a spreadsheet or a database. That's basically all it is. And there's a UI and a UX to it all, and that's very nice. But if you can't conceptualize your data and the targets that you want to go after as something that you could manually build inside of a spreadsheet, it's probably not that useful to you. And not that you need to go and build things into a spreadsheet, you could, but that is a starting point where if you need to be bootstrappy and lean, you can just think, let's just build a spreadsheet. And I know plenty of billion-dollar plus valuation companies that still run parts of their operations inside Google Docs, because that was just how they got started and that's how it kept going. And so that should be a lesson to the rest of us that technology is not, MarTech stacks, sales ops stacks, etc., are not necessary to actually grow revenue. As you said, they augment what already is there, and they augment the stuff that's good and they augment the stuff that's bad. And the opposition, the resistance to that inside an organization often comes down to the learning curve of that technology. Like, if it's 12 to 20 hours to learn that's half a week for a staffer to learn a new piece of technology. That's not too bad.
If they were doing it every day.
If they were doing it every day.
They have other responsibilities, so that might be a 6-month rollout.
Right, exactly. And that's just one staffer. Think of all of the people that you need to get on the same page. And that's where keeping it simpler is crucial in my eyes. Keeping your tech stack simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Your process is simple, so everybody knows who's responsible for what and that it works. There's that handoff. But just to go back to your list, the most common question I get from salespeople is, I don't know who to call. Have you ever sat, and not now, but working with companies in the past, as a marketer, have you ever looked at writing a post and asked, who the hell is this for?
Yeah. Yes.
But this is the problem, that it's from both sides, but because we're siloed, we don't know that we're both asking the same questions. So even if you're doing an account-based approach, Morgan, if me and you are doing this together and you're doing all the marketing and I'm out selling and we're focusing on different accounts with different messages, how bad does that look if now those messages creep over and it's like a doctor giving a prescription, then you go to another doctor for a second opinion, you get something completely different? How does that make you feel?
Oh, gosh. Or worse, honestly, what just popped into my mind is, the messaging on both angles accidentally works. And I actually see this all the time. Or like 80% of the time, the sales strategy works for the accounts that they go after, and the marketing messaging works to generate leads in some areas of the market. And so then the strategic level decision is, oh, look at these things that are working. We must be doing a great job. When in reality, sales and marketing aren't talking to each other and they're just incidentally happening into cash flow. That's not a strategic way to grow revenue. The strategic way to grow revenue is, as you said, to have sales and marketing using the same messaging towards the same accounts and working together. But what the incidental approach leads companies to is 6 months down the road, they say, oh, we must have been doing really well. And then it eventually hits a wall. It always does, right? It always hits a wall. It could be 12 months down the road. But you had this great growth. Sales is somehow getting accounts. Marketing is somehow driving the right leads or accounts to the sales team. And then it hits 12 months and suddenly everything falls apart.
Yeah, if they can't attribute where it came from.
Exactly.
Because they're relying on the software and the KPIs that the software gives you, and that's where they stop.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going back to the danger of software, and why overinvesting can be really dangerous is because you let it dictate your business. One of the biggest KPIs I've used for myself in sales is meaningful conversations per day. And I honestly think that is why the LinkedIn comment strategy is bananas. Hey Morgan, if you haven't tried this, if you're not regularly commenting, you only need to do about 5 a day, but on key posts, people that you actually want to work with or people that are trusted in the space that you work in. And if you just do that and nothing else, and make sure you have your profile filled out, you're going to understand why this works.
It's literally insane. I mean, you and I have been using this for however long, and the profile views increase, the engagement increase, the connection requests increase. And that's a mixture for us, at least, between posting frequently and commenting, really. That's all it is. And the point, but just to center this, the point of commenting is to generate a valuable conversation. It's not to grow your own base or to grow your profile.
And so why do most people don't do it?
Mm-hmm.
One is they don't know whose job it is. Is it sales or marketing? And how do they get credit? If you're listening to this, you're probably not allowed to go and do this strategy because you can't prove it.
Right.
Because your software doesn't integrate with it.
Yep.
And this is why we're not doing this when it comes to sales. And most companies will go and frown upon doing this is because they can't track it.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean commenting is going to get us accounts? Like, how do you even track that? That's going to be the question. How do we know that works? Show me the numbers. Show me the ROI.
Yeah. And how do you use software to find the right people to comment on?
Mm-hmm. Well, and the funny thing about that, just as a side note, the existing attribution software isn't actually that great. And this is something that's now been well documented, especially the Refine Labs team has done a lot of work on this. But even like years ago when I was working on web projects and like SEO and content strategy, especially pre, 2015, when there was a lot less noise about it, and it was maybe a little bit easier to rank number one on not long tail keywords, I was always confused because inside analytics, you would get a result that says, direct search or organic traffic. And you could have bananas organic traffic numbers. But then you look at the results of the keywords, and now there's a different tool to do this. Now it's Search Console. And you look at what people are searching out into the world. And for so many of these companies that I worked with, it was their branded term. They would be searching the company's name, not some generic keyword that then they would pop up number one on. And that is an excellent example where some other marketing activity you're spending money on is generating awareness inside the marketplace that then encourages people to search you, that then they end up on your website and potentially buy from you. Now, the fancy term for that is dark funnel or dark social. I learned it as brand marketing. There's brand marketing and direct marketing. Brand marketing is the stuff that's immeasurable. It promotes your company out in the world. It is inherently immeasurable. The Super Bowl ad that you run, you have no idea how many customers you actually got off of that Super Bowl ad. Direct marketing, the old school direct marketing approach is you run a print ad with a telephone number that only exists on that print ad, and then you measure the number of customers and calls you get off of that print ad because there's only one phone number that they call. The modern way, of course, is the advertising networks on Google and Facebook and all of the optimization around that. The problem is we got so invested in direct marketing because it was measurable, and you could essentially assess attribution based on the number of ads, the number of clicks, the number of visitors, the number of signups based on that one funnel, that we sort of forgot about the brand marketing approach. And now we have new terms to describe it around demand generation and dark funnel and dark social. But your brand efforts generate awareness out in the world about what you offer and why you're better than your competition and what value you provide, and build trust. And that drives behavior that has people search your branded terms or search you out directly on social networks. And those things, you may think you're getting a lot of organic traffic, but in reality, your marketing approach over here is actually generating all of that direct traffic. And that's why even backing up from the very specifics of, well, we can't measure this tactic, to, well, what can you measure? And at the end of the day, what you can measure is like single channel, like you can measure ROI across channels or single campaigns or construct funnels around those campaigns. But your brand marketing efforts are inherently immeasurable. And as marketers, we have to be comfortable with that. And we have to be comfortable making the case with that, with leadership saying this effort is going to drive our overall cost of acquisition down, because we're creating awareness in the marketplace. That's a brand marketing effort. So even from a broader sense, I don't even have confidence that a lot of the data marketers say is driving the bottom line is actually driving the bottom line. Things are more complex. They are not linear. There's not one path a buyer takes to purchase from you. And the more that we invest in technology, the more married we are going to get to specific metrics that technology provides.
It may not even question the assumptions that you made in that tech alone. Like how many ad tech platforms?
Oh.
And you look at actually how they sell the ads. When you think you're buying an ad from you didn't know that they earmarked a certain amount of premium ads for someone else that bought before you, and you'll never have access to them. Nope. And so where you think you're getting good results, you may never actually get good targeting because of the way they sell.
Right. And that's why metrics
getting deeper. You don't, if you're not asking the question and you're just trusting the technology, that's where you get in trouble.
Yep. My favorite metric is a blended cost of acquisition. And because I think it's the only reliable sense you have if you're doing both brand marketing efforts, content like this, or other things that are inherently immeasurable, and direct marketing efforts. Because if you have, let's say you spend, $1 million on marketing in a year, and you got X number of customers at an average deal size of Y, you can figure out your blended across organization cost of acquisition, and from a marketing perspective. And I would even argue to include sales in that if you have a sales team and the sales salaries, because now you can say, well, we are going to spend, $20,000 to acquire a customer across all of these activities. And your tech stack isn't going to tell you that, by the way. You have to go to your financials. We're going to spend $20,000 to acquire a new customer. And that the way we're spending those $20,000 are in these 5 ways. And 3 of them are direct, 2 of them are brand. And now you can go to leadership and say, well, we know it takes $20,000 to acquire a new customer right now, and we're working on driving down that acquisition cost. That is a far better approach than saying, well, we can spend $10,000 on Google ads and get this click-through rate that drives these people to this funnel with an assumption that funnel works anymore. And then we generate leads off of that. Like that's not the same sort of approach here. We're thinking much bigger about your entire revenue engine. And those sorts of metrics are not inherently embedded inside a tech stack. And in fact, a lot of the metrics that marketing technology stacks use are distracting from that blended CAC approach, which sounds like a disease, CAC, but cost of acquisition per customer.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I figured it was important to clarify, Nick.
Do you want to go quickly into detail of what exactly you would like minute details of what you would track in the financials, and like go into specifics, so deeper than just sales salaries? Like
Sure.
what else would you look for from marketing and sales, and would you include anything from service?
Ooh, great question. So I think from a financial perspective, when I think about revenue, obviously there's what's your top line revenue and what's your gross revenue or gross profit, technically. Basically, take out your cost of goods sold. And in COGS, traditionally, that's your advertising expenses, your event expenses, all of the programmatic stuff that you're doing, the money that you're spending to help generate that revenue. That's super important to get to that gross profit number. I think those things can also include your brand marketing expenses. And so that would be, if you really wanted to take it to the extreme, you could calculate the hours that somebody works if you do time tracking on a specific project, figure out what that means in terms of their salary, and then subtract that as well out of the gross revenue number. I don't think that's necessarily always the wisest approach. Because
you're having like really low margins where margin's an issue. I wouldn't.
Exactly. And that's where like you have to have a substantial margin to stay afloat anyways. And so I think about marketing and sales salaries as sort of as part of fixed expenses to the company, separate from your COGS that lead to gross profit. And that's how most P&L statements read anyways. And so as you get further down the P&L, the income statement, I would look at your salaries and your expenses in marketing and sales, not necessarily as a must include 100% of the time, but an awareness that we are dedicating, let's say, 12 people and also spending an additional $1 million or $500,000 or whatever on our outbound and inbound programs and any other cost of goods sold from sales or marketing to generate this kind of revenue. And this is more just like a rule of thumb, like a heuristic, a shortcut that you can think about as a leader in your organization saying, okay, well, it took us 12 people and $500,000 to generate X amount in revenue. Then you can start to think about scaling. What would it mean for us to have 15 people? And how would they work? What would it mean for us to have 18 people? And how would that relate to our COGS? What is our margin when we don't think about our staff? What is our margin when we think about our staff? Right? Staff expense is usually one of the largest line items inside fixed expenses. And I'm not convinced that success needs to be configured in terms of cost of acquisition, but success teams, product teams, delivery teams, whatever they are, do need to be thought about in terms of cost of retention. And there's not a lot of discussion or like a shortcut to configuring a cost of retention, but from a RevOps perspective, the metric that you are tracking is what percentage of customers are being retained. What percentage of customers, what's our monthly recurring revenue if we have that model, or annual recurring revenue if we have that model? What percentage of customers are driving that? And then from a leadership perspective, a resourcing perspective, you're thinking about how are we dedicating staff resources and also additional financial resources to boost those numbers or to increase those numbers where it makes sense.
Our friend Anton gave you a nice thank you.
Hey, Anton.
CAC.
Thank you for reminding about CAC. That's what has to, lie in the core of every venture's economy. That's right. And if I can extend the soapbox a minute longer. I know. The mistake that I see most marketing enterprises make or marketing organizations make around CAC is they take too narrow of a view. So
what do you mean?
They are looking at like single channel responses. They're only looking at direct marketing work. So essentially what they can measure, they're going to measure. And the blended CAC allows you to measure the brand marketing approach as well. So if you're only measuring your ad response rates and your CTRs and the amount of money that you spend on ads, you're not able to measure, and this comes to the modern, dark funnel, dark social concepts, you're not able to measure direct revenue contribution from running a podcast. It's inherently indirect. I mean, maybe you'll have one customer directly, right? And that's where asking when somebody reaches out, how did you hear about us, is a good way to be able to attribute revenue sources to different marketing activities. But even from a broad level, your blended CAC allows you to do brand marketing and allows you to make the case for brand marketing and demand generation. Because now you can say, okay, we're going to spend this additional amount of money or staff resources on generating X amount of content, on running a live show, on doing a podcast or whatever that gets attention out in the marketplace, that generates demand out in the marketplace. And now it's included in the cost of acquisition, looking at it, especially from a marketing perspective, about what that means to your average deal size and the number of customers in your overall pipeline. And that way, marketers can escape this direct marketing hamster wheel, always trying to measure, and instead being able to take more of a strategic approach at an organizational level and saying, we know it's going to take approximately $20,000 to generate another customer or whatever that figure runs out.
And that's nice because then, usually it's finance. So hopefully it's not finance that tells you that you're in trouble.
Let's hope not. Oh gosh.
But it's nice because say you're looking at pipeline and pipeline growth. As long as people are using the CRM, which everybody can, there's a number you can watch. And you can look at the acceleration, how long they're in, which stages, what the likelihood you're going to win. That's great. But, the coffee wore off. I went like a complete blank, but I was going to go somewhere else and I lost it. But
it's totally fine. I can reclaim in a different direction because I had a question to ask you.
Okay, let's do it.
What fundamentals in sales are lost when sales teams become over obsessed with their technology?
Oh, actually, this works perfectly. I remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
So with sales dev, it's the most expensive cost of acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're hunting somebody down for 90 plus days, because a lot of those sales cycles are more than 6 months, that's expensive. And you look at how much time is spent trying to go in, honestly, for them trying to figure out what to say and when. And so what gets lost is the hardest part is they don't know who to call and they don't know when to call. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to work an account. And they're not aligned with what marketing is doing as well. So it's very haphazard. Nobody's working together on the same plan, same strategy. And it's the same reason why there's no budget that's towards retention and growth, which is mind-blowing because it's the most profitable business you can run. It also goes into the referral market, which is the way most businesses grow fast, is people start talking about you. And if they're not, we can go to Net Promoter Score or a few of the other ones that have come in the past. But the reality is, if people aren't talking about you, or if people, in a positive way, if it's not positive, you definitely want to listen. But if they're not spreading positive news and people aren't coming to you, there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not happy with what you're doing enough to go and tell other people, there's an opportunity that you're missing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I'm seeing sales get way too focused on sales dev and just cold calling and emailing, and they're forgetting about knowing about the customer. They're forgetting about starting conversations and building relationships. And so we talk about branding. Salespeople need to take this approach too, the short and the long term. And I think this is where my assumption for the whole LinkedIn strategy came from, is that we're all disconnected living in our little, caves. And I can't even see the light outside.
Yeah.
But, for enough time. But everybody's stuck. They're craving that connection, that relationship. And think of the VPs, and this is one of the biggest comments I get is they get so sick of people being so selfish and wanting something from them and not putting the effort in to know who they are or what they need. If you can't make a case of why you should be calling somebody, do not approach them at all. You're wasting your time and their time. So what gets lost in technology, back again, is they assume it's going to do the work for them, but they're losing the basics of why would you want to talk to them in the first place? Who would you want to talk to? How do they make decisions? What's the chain of command? How do they communicate and share information within the company? What does that decision cycle look like? Is it something that they do at a board meeting? Is it something that just an individual makes that decision? If you don't know the answers to these questions, you're in a dangerous place, and you're going to be just like the other 99.9% of the salespeople that call them and harass them And it's the reason why emails aren't getting responded to as much, calls aren't being picked up, and the whole pitch slap came to be a thing in LinkedIn, is because people aren't doing the work. They're being lazy, and it shows in the way that they're approaching others. And, it's interesting looking at like tech like Cyrano. And Cyrano.ai builds personality profiles, and it tells you ways to approach people who they are. But what about doing a Google search on someone and looking at a more personal social media channel like Twitter or TikTok?
You mean actually doing the research up front?
Do you do that?
Do you do that? What a dangerous proposition, Nick.
Remember in Suits when they would do the practice cases and they would build a case in the background?
Yep.
One of the things I think helped me succeed in sales is I build a case on every account. And what I've been doing every morning, it takes me about 30 minutes, but I build a case on an account and I start doing my outreach. It also helps me with marketing, and I'll ask myself what I need to know to prove it true or false. I don't think technology could do this for us. It might help ease the conversation, like Cyrano and looking at the Myers-Briggs or the personality traits that would dictate how they consume information, how they interact with others. But there's got to be a business case. Like we're talking about the cost of acquisition. If you don't know these numbers, you don't know how much you can afford to invest to go and build business. Now you're going to go to an investor and finance growth, and you don't even know what the cost of acquisition is, your average profit margin, and the retention, like long-term value of that customer.
Well, and what's interesting that you bring up too is a lot of the sales development motion is actually pre-pipeline.
Yeah.
So it's not technically pre-pipeline if you have a very expansive definition of pipeline, but everything that you brought up, the questions that you have to answer, should be before they are added to a CRM.
Yeah, and if marketing and sales dev are working together, sales dev should be the emotional component of marketing. They should be the recon. They should be the ones going out in camo and watching very eerily from afar to see what people are doing. How do they interact with others on social media? If you live in a location where you can actually go and see what they're doing, go into their head office, go into peek in their break room, look at what their life's like, what's the environment like, is it a pretty strict atmosphere? But this is what you need to know. It's all about having conversations. So many times we get lost in that. Well, how do I approach them? What's the cold call script? What's the email? What's the sequence? How do I go and develop the cadence? What software should I be using? You miss the point. The point is, how do you start a worthwhile conversation that leads to them wanting to know more? Because we've all been hit with verbal diarrhea, and it is the worst and most grotesque experience because you're looking how to run away in a hurry. And
what a great term. I'm going to use that.
Just to see the look on Morgan's face.
That was great.
But these are the basics. And the thing is, sales and marketing can work together, and so can service, and they all have different pieces of information that lead to better conversations. But it's not shared. It's all siloed. It's all in these black holes within the gaps of the system.
Well,
and
interesting.
You're not training on the system. And being specific on the system. Like even a lot of the companies I talk to don't know what their deal stages are. Or we have different assumptions of what they are. Oh, so you wanted me to go into a strategy and that was supposed to, or an audit, or like that was stage one? Before that, they're just a lead?
Well, and interestingly, what is shared is quantitative, right? And this is an interesting blind spot of RevOps in many ways, in that what is shared across marketing, sales, and service and well-functioning revenue-based organizations is pipeline deals, blended CAC, acceleration, like pipeline acceleration movements and retention rates, monthly recurring revenue, if that's your model, et cetera, et cetera. What is not shared is the qualitative insights that you're bringing up, the moments of conversation that a salesperson has with a large account that you're trying to sell to, that marketing needs to know in order to run the right sorts of messaging and campaign or build the right kind of collateral, especially if you're doing like ABM strategies. And like ABM as a motion is inside of a sales motion helps, it does help do that. But from companies that either don't do ABM well or companies that don't need an ABM strategy or an ABM motion, like there's the insights that have to be shared across marketing, sales, and services. Not did that account close? Like that's cool. That's important to know. But your RevOps matrix or your revenue metrics are going to tell you that as long as you're paying attention to those. What is not usually shared is the qualitative insights. Oh, this company, they're a little strict compared to the other people that we're going after. Our fun and goofy approach is probably, if we want this account, is probably not going to speak to them. Or
unless you like specifically pick who on that team you want to talk to.
Exactly.
So if you're more analytical, well, maybe you're going for a controller or you're an engineer, or you have to be very strategic and you have to know your tactics well.
Mm-hmm.
But where do you store that information? That's the hardest part too, because everything is designed to just have generic notes. Yeah, they're nice. But when I build a case, and I need to be better at this because people listening, I do a lot in just Google.
Yeah.
And I do it for my own. I've had the same process that I've refined over the past 10 years. And I've showed you like what I do with the connection strategy and how I track everything. And thank you for adding to it. But that you got to have that. You got to build a case. You got to build a case to talk to companies. This isn't rocket science. It is hard when you start. Like when I first started doing this, it took me 4 hours. But then once you've done it enough times and you've also been knee deep in a sales process that's been absolutely derailed on you because somebody comes in at the final hour, you start to realize where your blind spots are and you seek them out. And actually, it kind of reminds me of Chris Voss and Never Split the Difference. He talks about the accusation audit. And it's essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking at how somebody could come in and derail the process. And I dot the I's and cross the T's and button it up long before it comes up. But it makes for better conversations because then we can skip the BS and we can get to the meat and potatoes that is real business. But before that, it's a relationship. And this is why approaches on LinkedIn fail. They try to sell. They don't try to go in. The first sale should be you. Why you? Why should I be connected to you? What can I get from you? And it sounds selfish, but everybody wants to know what's in it for them. So the first thing is just starting a worthwhile conversation and improving credibility.
And people like nice people. People like nice people. Or maybe more specifically, the people you would want to work with like nice people, or at least the people that I want to work with. That's true. And so reaching out and starting a conversation, that's part of just being a nice person. It's not, here's what I can do for you. I got pitch slapped the other day. Like, here's what I can do for you. It's like, no thanks. And I have no reason to be engaged or interested.
Or
but other people,
but no, honestly,
it's true.
Why would I believe you?
Right.
You couldn't even take the time to go and build a case around very specifics of how you could do that. So why would I believe you that you're going to take the effort later to do it right?
Or start a conversation about their priorities. And guess what? Chances are their priorities, their actual priorities, are not related to what you sell. Not directly, at least. And the things that are top of mind are not directly related to what you're trying to sell. And the problem when you're trying to be selfish on LinkedIn or any other platform on cold calling, etc., and you try and say, here's what we can do for you, they're not even thinking about what you can do for them. They're thinking about, how do I solve X or Y? How do I deal with these things in my life? And if you can open up a conversation focused on those and just have a conversation focused on those instead of trying to sell a specific thing, and you can guide that conversation. You and I both follow like Blissful Prospecting, and they have some good tips on how to narrow down that conversation to specific priorities, choosing between A or B, which of these are more important. Like, that's a good way to start a conversation or continue one as well. But if you just start with, here's what I'm selling, like, that's no different than walking up to somebody on the street saying, you want this? Here's what I'm selling.
Well, I compare it to knocking on somebody's door, walking in and sitting down at their table.
That's such a good image.
But you're putting yourself in such an intimate situation where it's so vulnerable. And so you walk up to me out of the blue and expect to sit at my dinner table and me to pour my heart out to you? Why would you deserve that?
Right.
And this is where we go back to tech.
Mm-hmm.
And Kim actually said it really well the other day. She's like, so what are we going to do when tech is more emotionally intelligent than us? Sales, if you're listening to this, you should be scared for your jobs. If we're not being emotionally intelligent, we're not building relationships, we're not earning trust, proving value, and showing advantage, tech's going to take your job.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not doing the fundamentals that give us a job. We are the emotional connectors. Marketing takes a different avenue. How would you, if I had to go and say, how would you explain marketing quick?
How would I explain marketing quick?
Like quick, like a sentence or less. I would say sales is the emotional glue that holds things together, which to me is a relationship. They're going to go to bat for you to make sure that, because who do you normally talk to when honestly shit goes awry, and say you're at a hotel or you bought a computer or something goes wrong? Who do you normally call? Sales or service. And this is where they win you forever. We talked about this on a previous episode, because they make it right. They earn your trust for life.
I think marketing in one sentence would be marketing makes change happen.
I would agree that their marketing's job is to change your point of view to see something that was once lost.
And the way you do that is storytelling and emotional connection and, you know, building community and all of the different sort of strategies that rely on it. But marketing is saying, so this is a great example. A lot of people say they don't change their minds all that often. Or a lot of people say it's really hard to change somebody's minds. That's all marketing's job. It's to change somebody's mind. And just the other day, I had put on a shirt that I wasn't like super confident in. It was a bold print, you know? And I was like, do I look good in this? Like, that's that uncertainty. Like, do I look good in this? And my partner was like, yeah. I was like, okay, then I'm going to wear it. And that's marketing right there. Like, it's changing somebody's mind. And all of...
So I want to challenge this, because I think this is a good conversation. Is that marketing or is that sales? Because that to me is buyer's remorse. That is because sales needed to come in and nurture that process to the end, and not just to the transaction, but post-transaction to deal with the emotions that arise through the process, to check all the boxes in the buyer's journey, but buyer enablement.
I agree. That's probably sales, actually. Yeah.
But I think marketing's job is to set up the mannequin or place the ad or start the dialogue where people can share, where they're like, damn, I think that would look really good on me.
Yeah.
But it makes you say that. It makes you go, you know what? I bet you that would look really good on me. And I honestly think now it is marketing's job to take you to the till.
Oh,
and it's only sales' job to come in when there's an emotion that...
In America, we would call the till the cash register, just for everyone listening. So take you to the cash register, to the point of purchase, 100%. And like B2C does this already. You know, the B2C world does this all the time. It's the B2B world that gets all caught up in, well, where does sales take over? And truly, I 100% agree with you. I like that differentiation. And I think the mistake that marketers make is when it comes to actually changing people's mind is they think they just have to interrupt in the right way. And this is an old school concept, right? That they just have to place the radio ad back in the, let's go old, pre-internet, place the radio ad at the right time so that somebody's going to call.
With the right intent.
And with the right intent, right? Or at the right stage of the buying cycle. And at the end of the day, nowadays, with all the technology that's out there, all of our automation tools, all of our advertising networks, well, social media, but advertising networks, and everything else at our disposal, everyone's getting interrupted all the time. And this is true at the peak of TV as well. This is going to be even probably more true in the future of the internet. It's just, here, click our ad. We're going to try and funnel you to death or whatever. And great marketing is not necessarily interruption based. It's genuinely creating that relationship, that visibility out in the world, that people just start to pay attention to you. And of course, that's brand marketing. Like, that is a brand marketing initiative, is so that people
Don't ruin it. Just keep going.
I know. I have to tie it back. Come on, Nick. That's a brand marketing initiative that to get people interested so they change their mind. And to the same point of, I walk into a store and think, oh, that shirt's going to look good on me. Somebody sees your company for the third time and they say, you know what? I think that product would look good in our company.
And that's something that we align with.
Yeah.
And
that's marketing. That's changing people's minds. And then to your point, sales is helping close the sale and facilitate and the buyer's remorse journey and all the rest of that. Yep.
Yeah, we provide the therapy.
Yeah. Honestly, no, I think therapists would be great salespeople.
The gentleman that owns Cyrano is a clinical psychologist.
Truly, they'd
and
probably
I told him
be so good.
We should go and do a series just on comparing sales to psychology. Honestly, the first book that really changed the game for me was How to Make Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yep, a classic.
And then it added a 0 to my commission checks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started reading about cognitive therapy and motivational interviewing and basically how to get people out of their own way to have a good conversation, not to sell. This is a part that I think most people forget. I didn't learn how to sell. I learned how to start a conversation and help people get out of the way of having a good conversation. And I keep getting pulled back. So going back to your comment about how does the tech rely on that? Well, the tech is going to tell you to do one thing. Your gut might tell you to do another. And so this is where we got to find that balance, is between what is your gut telling you to respect that person versus what is the intent data telling you versus what's happening, because they're not showing up on your doorstep. You haven't earned their trust and you haven't built a strong enough reputation. And that takes time. Why do we go and trust Jay, Chris Walker, Chris Voss, David C. Baker, Blair Enns? Why do we trust them? Because we started out with like a trailer, something that spoke our language, that aligned with either a struggle that we're having or a goal that we're trying to achieve, and it hooked us. We were in. And then you listen a little more and you listen a little more. Next thing you know, you've binged their entire podcast or their series or books, and you're hungry for more because they've earned that. How are we applying that to marketing and sales?
Mm-hmm.
We're not.
And those are the fundamentals, right? And the shiny tech stack is distracting us from those fundamentals. And I think at a sort of a bright line of this whole conversation, sort of a thread that goes through the entire thing, is technology is augmentation. And especially technology where it is today, artificial intelligence even. All of that can augment what you're doing. It can optimize it. It can automate it. It can make things go faster. But if you don't have the skills and strategies to tackle the fundamentals of the sales process or the sales development motion or the fundamentals of crafting a great marketing campaign, that technology is just going to augment that. It's just going to make your poor ads do worse, faster, or your sales development process not. I don't know.
Gary Vee said something the other day that just cracked me up. He's like, no, first and foremost, you need to do what you do really well.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do it really well, the world will know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, the world will know.
The world will know.
I'm good at my job. And
it's true. And I think that fundamental skill sets or those fundamental skill sets are crucial to succeed in these positions, whether or not you have the fanciest CRM on the block, or you have the best ad network around, or you have a great messaging architecture, or whatever. Like, all of those things are tactical, and you can change tactics whenever, but being able to see clearly and have that emotional intelligence with your customers, which is true for both marketers and salespeople, that is the fundamental that drives tech stack performance.
Amen.
Well, I think we're at the hour.
I was gonna go. I was trying to decide if I wanted to say anything else, and I'm like, no, that's a pretty nice button up.
Nice.
Just let's call her a day.
Call her a day. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to today's B2B Power Hour. I'm Morgan Smith.
And I'm Nicholas Thickett. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Have a good day. See you soon, Nick.
See you soon.